Afternoons with Paula Kruger on ABC Radio Canberra.
And on afternoons on ABC Radio Canberra, it is 12 minutes past 3. And we're going to talk about the things that are difficult to talk about usually with kids, but it's okay. You'll be hearing from some people who are actually very good at it and are here to help. And that we're talking specifically about images of concentration camps in World War II. They're very confronting, but let's face it, it's an important part of educating the next generation to ensure that genocide is never allowed to happen again. In Melbourne, the Jewish Holocaust Centre continues to provide education and information to combat racism, to combat prejudice as well. However, COVID-19 lockdown has prevented visitors or its regular school programs. So the centre has started offering online sessions with schools and community groups. With you right now from the Jewish Holocaust Centre Education Engagement Manager, Jennifer Levitt Maxwell. And very soon we'll be catching up with Paul Grinwald, who is an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor. So looking forward to hearing from Paul too. But firstly, Jennifer is with you. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us here on Afternoons. For you, how important is it to tell the stories from the Holocaust to Australian school children today?
Thanks, Paula. Thanks for having us today. We're living in interesting times, and really we think it's vital. The Holocaust shows us the extremes of our human behavior and what is possible, but it also shows us that we all have agency to make a difference. If you listen to any Holocaust survivor's story, you will always hear the stories of those that helped them. No survivor could have survived without that help. And I think that really speaks clearly in the message to us all that we all have a role to play in tackling racism, hatred, and prejudice.
And I guess that's we hear that so often where when you're talking to kids about difficult news, that even in the saddest stories, it's balancing it with the positive and I guess the heroes and the people who did do something, Jennifer.
That's correct. And I know you mentioned earlier about the challenges of teaching the Holocaust. And, that's why we created this whole online resource. It's because we wanted, during COVID-19, we wanted teachers to know that we're here to support them and we're here to support students. And that's why we follow a methodology of safely in, safely out to ensure that the teaching of the Holocaust is done in an appropriate way. And we talk about life before the war, and we talk about the hope and resilience. I mean, the survivors, they have lived through the darkest days of humanity, and then they came to Australia and they built their lives, and they have gone on to do incredible things.
Jennifer, when you're doing that in person, so much of what you do involves tone and, you have a very measured approach to passing on information. Was it difficult to shift to an online program?
It's a really interesting question. And I think, what we've been able to do is we have an incredible education team, and we follow an incredible curriculum and our own kind of internal approach for how we do this. And so that has really allowed us the tools to be able to translate what we do in person to online. And I think that is what has led to this being so successful, and the response that we're seeing not only in Victoria but across the country with our programs.
And I guess that's one of the benefits, especially for us speaking from the ACT, is that we've got access to your centre now.
I know, and that's the most exciting thing, and I guess that's like the silver lining, if there is one, from COVID, is that we were really bound within the walls of our museum, and now we're not anymore, and we are able to connect students and teachers from across the country with these Australians. These are Australian stories, and that's the part that we're the most excited about, is that now our community of Melbourne-based survivors can be connecting with these students and teachers through our online programs and our virtual workshops.
So can you expand a bit more on the online information that you are providing? You mentioned the stories there. Is that what people will be experiencing with these resources?
Yeah, so when they come to our website, thejhc.org.au, you can find our virtual learning section. And we've got a variety of programs featuring our survivors, like our virtual tour of our museum, where our survivors are your guide. We also have a program called Ask a Survivor. It's really interesting. And Paul, who you're going to hear from, is part of that program. And we have curated the 18 most commonly asked questions by students to our survivors. And we've put that in an interactive program where you can compare and listen to the different answers from a variety of survivors. And we also have tutorials. We have downloadable resources for teachers and students, and also information on our virtual workshops.
What has been the response, Jennifer?
So it's been really overwhelming. I think when we first started, we weren't sure if the experience would translate virtually and be as meaningful. And I think what we found is that it is. I think our education team has really been able to craft something that's scaffolded and that is really meaningful. And I think the other element, too, is that we're really connecting and supporting teachers across the country in a way that we've never really been able to do before. And so the response from that has been extraordinary.
And how can people get access to this if they're listening now and they're interested, Jennifer?
Absolutely. So you just come on over to our website, jhc.org.au. You'll find the virtual learning section on our site, and there you'll see all the programs listed. We definitely encourage you, students, teachers, parents, to come on and have a look, get in touch with us. We're just really passionate about connecting as many people as we can with these Melbourne-based survivors, and for them to know that we have Australian stories that can really tell the stories of the Holocaust.
And we're just about to meet Paul, Jennifer. What does Paul mean to you at the Jewish Holocaust Centre there?
How do you even put it into words? I'm sad that I'm sorry you're not going to get to see him in person. So please go and check him out in our online programs, because he has the most beautiful smile, and I'm sure you will feel his energy through the radio. But it is an honor and a privilege to work with Paul and all of our survivors. Shifting and doing these things can sometimes be difficult, but when you have that as your driving force, nothing is too hard. So it's a honor and privilege to get to know Paul and all our survivors.
We're looking forward to meeting him in just a few seconds. But Jennifer, firstly, thank you to you and for your time here on Afternoons on ABC Radio Canberra.
Thank you so much.
That is Jennifer Levitt Maxwell, and she is the Education and Engagement Manager at the Jewish Holocaust Centre. And so the website is jhc.org.au if you're wanting to get more information. One of the people that you will meet on this website, as Jennifer was just mentioning, was his name is Paul Grinwald. He is a 87-year-old Holocaust survivor. Paul, great to have you on the program. Thank you for your time. As a survivor of the Holocaust, you were a young boy when the Germans occupied France. What happened?
Well, I was only 7 years old when the Germans occupied Paris, when they marched into Paris, which I still very vividly remember. But at first, after about 3 months, laws were taken against the Jews, such as they couldn't practice their profession, and there were curfews on and all sorts of restrictions. Personally, it didn't impact on me personally, because I was 7 years old. My father was a baker. He was working on a job. He never had a business. And Jews were not allowed to run businesses anymore. The only thing that we were impacted at the time is we had to hand in motor cars, bicycles, radios. We had no motor car, no bicycle, but we did have a radio, and we had to give up the radio. But life went on as normal. I still lived in an apartment. I went to a government school. Until about 8, I was a member of the municipal library in Paris, and I used to go there once a week and spend a bit of time in the library and take 2 books home. And I used to be an avid reader. I used to love books. I used to love reading. And until one day, I probably was about 8 years old at the time, the librarian asked me, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yes." In that case, we don't lend books to Jews here. She took my membership card, tore it up, threw it in the waste paper bin, and asked me to leave and never to come back. She didn't have to ask me that. We didn't wear the star yet. We had to put on a star only a few weeks later, and she didn't have to ask me whether I was Jewish or not. But she did, and that was the first really impact on me of being a Jew in France at the time.
Yeah.
Most of my friends were not Jewish. We were a secular family. We were not religious.
Can I ask, you're just telling us some, amazing experiences of during the war. How important is it to talk about your experiences, especially to young people who share your city of Melbourne?
Well, I feel that by talking to young people, that at least I'll impress them that we're all one. We're all of the human race. There's no races as such. We all belong to the one race, irrespective of the color of our skin, the features of our faces, the religion we follow, or our cultural backgrounds, and that we should learn to respect each other and take us for what we are, and not discriminate against some people because they are different from the general population.
And what questions do students tend to ask you about events during World War II, Paul?
Mainly, did I know why the Jews were disliked by the Germans?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you perceive the Germans? Did you understand what was going on around you at such a young age? What was it like having to constantly move in France? How was it like going back to school after you missed a lot of it? See, I didn't go to school for 3 years. How did your perspective change about the Germans from back and then? All sorts of questions like that, general questions that applied to me personally.
Well, Paul, we appreciate you telling us your story, not only here on ABC Radio Canberra, but through the Jewish Holocaust Centre. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's
right. That was a pleasure. And I did not tell you my story. To tell you my story would take about 2 hours.
Oh, but I tell you what, we look forward to, we know where we can go to find out more about your story, Paul, and I'd really love the 2 hours to have a really good listen to it as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That's Paul Grinwald. So he's a 87-year-old Holocaust survivor, and his story, like I mentioned, along with many Holocaust survivors in the Melbourne area, they've been collected by the Jewish Holocaust Centre. And not only have they been collected there, but given that they can't open their doors to the public and to schools at the moment, they've made a whole lot of online resources so that we can all hear Paul's story, and a lot of these resources are targeting school kids as well. So you can go to the Jewish Holocaust Centre website, which is jhc.org.au. I'll just say that again, jhc.org.au, and you'll see some of the resources there, which includes Paul Grinwald's story. And Jennifer says it's, even if you just want to see it for Paul's wonderful smile, it's a good place to go.
This is Afternoons with Paula Kruger on ABC Radio Canberra.